protests on Thursday on the East Bank of Demerara had far-reaching consequences for hundreds of Guyanese. As a matter of fact, some persons are still reeling from the effects of those actions, which included blocking of the roadways, the burning of debris, and based on reports, in some cases persons were beaten and robbed. Joining me this evening as we continue to dissect the events on Thursday, October 11 on the East Bank of Demerara are the Acting Home Affairs Minister, the Honorable Robertson Ben, and Mr. Manzoor Nadir, the People's Progressive Party Member of Parliament. Gentlemen, welcome to the program and good evening.
Thank you, Eddie. Good evening.
Of course, the events, looking at the events, what transpired yesterday, there are so many questions in the minds of Guyanese as to what may have been the motive behind what happened. Your initial comments as it relates to what transpired yesterday. Minister.
Well, thank you and good evening again. The events, with some hindsight, appear to us to be orchestrated, premeditated, and organized to a level intended to cause public disorder and panic. We are aware that even though it is my belief too that we've had relative improvement in the Guyana police force over the years, and even when we have some dents in our confidence with respect to the operations of the police force, with respect to certain units or certain personalities, we have had improvements. But there could not be a situation which suggests when you have persons staying out there from the political angle, speaking in such a way that they're vilifying the police force. We don't believe that every member of the police force would want situations where there's a loss of lives of youths of any citizen. We don't think that there's an overt intention to go out there and commit acts, allow for things to happen where people would die. It has happened on occasion. It has happened with some frequency just now, and it has to be addressed with respect to, as I said, deviant behavior and personalities. But in this particular case, even when we have a commission of inquiry on, which examines the issues with respect to the police force, certain incidents that happened in Linden, one hears of Messrs. Nagamutu from the AFC delivering an ultimatum to the president of the country that even though that there's this discussion and this attempt to understand and resolve the problems that we have as a country with respect to these matters, that an ultimatum is being given to the president. That if he doesn't say remove Minister Rohee by a certain time, by midnight, what will happen? Certain things will happen. And those things did happen. Those things happened because the AFC said some things, and the result was, Hughes and Nagamutu, the result was that we had this incident. We had falling their pronouncements and statements. We had some whistle-stop meetings on the West Bank and the West Coast, I think, in some instances. Some youths were told certain things. We understand that some who are more bent on criminal activities, that some of those persons were paid. We've heard, and we're trying to verify that gasoline was being shared out in Agricola area. That Agricola itself was chosen because it is a particular choke point, as it were, on the East Bank of Demerara, and which would perhaps create the greatest hardship for people. And so we had the ultimatum, and we had the events which logically, perhaps now that we look back at it in hindsight, the results. Great discomfort to thousands of persons, not merely hundreds. Great stress, a disruption of our economy, of activity, and the usual suspects in respect of the political actors and players appearing on the scene and trying to make political capital out of this to bring our country back down in a state of lawlessness.
Eddie, first I want to share once again the PPPC government, the PPPC party and my own sincere sympathies to the family of the young lad who was killed in Agricola. One cannot take away from that sad incident that happened. But firmly fixed in my mind is my very strong belief, and very well supported by the evidence, that both the AFC and the PNC-led APNU have one design: to oppose and dispose of the PPPC government that was duly elected by the ballot. And they want to do that by all and any means whatsoever. And so Agricola, I agree with Minister, that is an event that was planned. What happened in Agricola and what happened in the magistrate's court yesterday was not spontaneity. There were events that were planned, instigated, and driven by, especially in this instant, the Alliance for Change, led by their two new strong men, Moses Nagamutu and Nigel Hughes. They are now the two strong men of the Alliance for Change. And so they are now ignoring all of the precepts of due process, law and order. And as the President said tonight, whenever we seem to be going along well economically, you will have these interventions by the opposition to derail our development, to sidetrack our economic growth and the development that is concomitant to the people of our country. So firmly fixed in my mind is the hands of the Alliance for Change and the strong people of today to ensure that they can do a number of things to dispose of this PPPC administration. And when you look at what has happened in Linden and what has happened in Agricola, and the statements that have preceded Linden and the statement that has preceded yesterday by the AFC, not only are they acting independently, but the elements of close collaboration between the two. So yesterday, in spite of the seriousness of what happened to young Shakil and the grief and loss of the family and the people of Agricola, I don't see yesterday as the people of Agricola coming out and rebelling because of that young lad's death. And I can tell you, over the past 2.5 years, I have had the opportunity to interact with over 200 young people from Agricola. The late Henry Green, a few years ago, embarked on a program of starting youth clubs and scouts associations. And one of the first areas he went into was Agricola. And Commander George Vivehouse and his A Division team were in the forefront of establishing that Agricola Scout group. Religiously, every Saturday morning, those young people will come to the Eccles Youth, Skills, and ICT Center every Saturday morning. And they would collect the keys from that center, from the security, and open that center. And after all this time, we haven't had bad language, bad behavior, or any incident that will speak to deviant behavior in that center. And these are hundreds of young people, and they would have had to come from the good homes of Agricola. The good homes of Agricola. So, from what I know, clearly the people who were on the public road of Agricola, and that's why I want to make a distinction between Agricola and the public road of Agricola. The people who live in Agricola and those who are on the public road of Agricola are not necessarily the same people. And I would not dispense of any idea that the elements who were there disrupting and causing all of the grief, the hurt, the dislocation yesterday would have been elements brought there especially by the AFC.
Minister Ben, you spoke about the ultimatum. It might be interesting maybe for us to have a look at that particular comment by Mr. Nigel Hughes. So if the operator can just pull up that comment and let's just have a look at that comment.
People feeling that they had no recourse to law. So we had a very, very, very critical situation, and this is a national issue. As we said yesterday, if the private sector, the social services, the social organization, the NGOs, this is their time to speak. This is not a political issue. You cannot possibly be having a social drink in a public place, abiding by the law, and end up dead. Not acceptable, and that's not a political issue. So I just want to take the politics out of this. It so happens that because we are the majority representatives in Parliament, we are taking the lead because a lot of society is afraid. But this is a national issue. It is a national crisis, and I believe that the next steps, and I don't want to prejudice the discussions that we will have, require mass demonstrations, because we are not prepared to continue to have people shot like this. It is not 2 months since Linden. The commissioners of foreign guests who we invited here to sit have just left. What manner of madness is this, that we as a country have absolutely no respect for the rule of law, no respect for life. All these things which are guaranteed in the Constitution, we're prepared to abuse. So we are calling on the wider society. We don't want to lead it because this is a national crisis, but if the point comes where we have to lead the mass protest, we will lead it, and it will come. I'm not saying if, it will come. We are affording them an opportunity. They have 48 hours to do what is right. And after that, I am sure, are going to call for mass demonstrations. Thank you.
Now you have 3 of them on the close arrest.
You heard the 48 hours ultimatum. Certainly, as I said before, no one wants. There's no person in the police force who would want to go there and kill people out of hand. Fundamentally, their standing operating procedures, their history, even at the time when they were under great difficulty, during the time of the crime wave, when policemen were being killed, assassinated in this country, this did not happen. And we have seen videos from yesterday's events where the police showed a great deal of forbearance and that they didn't resort to the continuum of using force. The continuum in terms of using force was perhaps not applied in finality in respect of what occurred last night. We saw people running at the police with cutlasses and pelting policemen with bricks and bottles. And some policemen were in fact injured. Perhaps one may have lost his eye. Policemen and firemen were injured last night. There has been aberrant behavior. There has been a problem. We have a commission of inquiry. The policemen involved in both cases, both in the case of the fish shop on Hatfield Street and both in the case of young Shakil in Agricola, policemen have been charged. They are in the lockups. Their faces have been to the courts. They are not above the law in terms of what they do, in terms of deviant behavior, other than the disciplinary precepts they're under, the codes that they're under. So why is there this business of about an ultimatum? Is it that they want to derail, in fact, the commission of inquiry? Is it that they want to take advantage of this aberrant behavior to bring this society, as I said, into a state of disorder so that they could ride into government on the backs and on the blood of the ordinary citizens of the country? What else could it be? Why would they not want to allow? And Mr. Hughes is a lawyer. And Nagamutu too, I understand, is a lawyer.
But Minister, this is the point I'm making. Here we have Nigel Hughes, the chairman of the AFC, newfound political platform from which to pontificate. Here he's talking about the Constitution and due process. And at the same time, he is willing to use these 2 unfortunate deaths these two unfortunate deaths, to cause so much dislocation, harm, disruption of law and order. And at the same time, while he's calling for the Constitution and due process, and he defends the rights of criminals, defend criminals their rights to due process. And in this case, these officers who have been charged, they are similarly entitled to due process.
Yes.
They are similarly entitled to the representation that Nigel Hughes would give to criminals. But he wants larger action. Clearly, the overwhelming majority of the Guyanese people, the civil society is talking about, the non-governmental organizations, they see like us. Give the Commission of Inquiry an opportunity to meet, to have their findings. They are of the view that we should have law and order. It's not always going to come down totally every time on the right side. There will be some anomalies, but that has to be the first order of the day. But he wants mass action, and he is ready to provide an ultimatum. What that ultimatum is a threat. It's a threat, and implied in that is terrorism. And to me, what was meted out yesterday to the police is no less than terror, to break, to shake the confidence of the police persons. I agree with Minister that you're going to have situations where all will not go right. I remember when at one time in the United States you had this big issue of police chasing down errand drivers and these highway chases. And because so many of them ended up not only in crashes that caused the death of the driver, but innocent passengers, there was an edict issued. Don't chase if it's going to endanger the life of people. And I'm sure in all of our examinations of our protocols in the police force, these are things that the Commissioner, the Home Affairs Minister constantly have to review. Constantly have to review. But the AFC now is seeing this niche to use every single opportunity and any means possible in order to make them appear as those who can defend the rights of everybody and at the same time be the best government Guyana has ever seen. But you know what will happen? The AFC, they will go to Berbice and they will take this same footage. They will go to Berbice and they will say to Berbicians, you see, your government, implying race, can't protect you. Look what happened in Agricola when they were hand and foot in the pot, stirring up Agricola. But they will take the same footage and you'll see them parading in Berbice.
Matter of fact, at the press conference today, I think it's now the race card, if you want to put it that way, is being played out as it relates to, you know, who's playing on race and that sort of thing. Maybe we could have a little view of that, a little snippet of Mr. Nagamoto's comments today as it relates to trying to imply or play the race card. All right, in the meantime, the guy is trying to get that together.
Well, let me just make one comment with respect to the vilification of the police force. We want the same things Mr. Hughes mouths about in terms of the protection of the citizens, the avoidance, the prevention of unlawful police killings, and all of those things. But I think fundamentally from all that is being said, there is a sinister attempt really behind all of this in terms of political motive not to have police, proper policing. They want the police to be castrated. They want the police not to act. They want to frighten the police not into taking the necessary action to protect the citizens. I would have to be the first here to apologize to the citizens of Georgetown, the East Bank, the West Coast, and people coming from the airport, that people were assaulted, people were robbed, people did not get home for 4 or 5 hours, and that we had all of this dislocation and problems. And the fact we have to state it too, because it demeans me as one type of Guyanese, if there's another type of Guyanese suffers the most from this type of activity. It is a fact that people of Indian extraction were targeted at Stabroek and on the East Bank in terms of robbery. Most of the robberies occurred by targeting those people. Not them alone, but most of them. That is what the reports are. And it demeans us all Guyanese if it happens to any particular group, whatever race they are, if there's a targeting of a particular group. So by creating an atmosphere, an environment in which the police is irresolute and not wanting to act, the criminal elements are given opportunity. People are hurt. Many people have gone home quietly, having lost their money, their cell phones, their jewelry, whatever they had. They've got to suck it in, take it, and go home.
Not only with the losses too, some of them would have been
beaten, and it demeans all of us Guyanese. And so the very things about civil rights, human rights, and all those things which Mr. Hughes talks about, and is suggesting perhaps that he wants to see happen as a result of commissions of inquiry, improvements as a result of our continuing reforms, coaching, and improvements in terms of the policing work, goes to naught when it is clear that their actions have a political motive and that it results in the harming of these ordinary citizens and harming the country, harming our society. So we need to condemn this type of behavior, that it has a political motive, that it's sinister, and that when there is no police, when there's police inaction, bad things happen.
Eddie, for me, the bigger tragedy yesterday was those who were trapped in those vehicles, and especially the babies, the children, women, and men, trapped in those vehicles, and for hours, babies crying, young children who understand that harm and hurt could come to them and their families, traumatized. In every family, they say the women are the caregivers and more concerned. Men do too. But when you look and see sitting in a vehicle trapped for 5 hours, your children screaming, people running with weapons in their hands. Wood is a weapon, especially in times like those. And all they can say is, what is my government doing to protect me? And effectively, the opposition would have now planted firmly in their minds that this has nothing to do with the opposition. This has to do with the government. And this is really what another one of the reasons for this, to shift the microscope away from the AFC and what they are doing to drive fear in the minds of people because of a government who they feel can protect them, and shift it to Roger Luncheon and say he incited it and he caused it. So this is just totally wicked, nasty politics at play here, nothing less.
I don't think it's coincidental that the day after that ultimatum would have expired, this happened. But like I promised earlier, I think we should take a look at the video first and maybe see what is coming out in terms of this whole playing up on this whole race issue.
The first one, I believe that the PPP is using ethnicity and race for political mobilization. It is not perhaps trying to get an ethnic collision, but it wants to exploit sentiments in the society, in individual communities. For example, when Linden unrest.
In saying this, violence is always a trigger. Violence against.
The consequences may be violence, but for the purposes of the PPP, it is to win back lost territory. So it exploits ethnic divisions in the society, incites it for political mobilization, because it can go to Berbice now, assuming there was an Indian woman raped in Linden. It could have gone to Berbice and said, you see what Nagamutu and them doing in Linden? they're getting black people to rape Indian people. So that the 60s was not played over. They're surprised, they're shocked and disappointed.
That's right.
That the scenario had changed because the consciousness of the Guyanese people has now risen to an extent where they no longer see issues in race terms, they see issues in terms of their own interests. And they fight for those interests. Lyndon was specific. Lyndon
listening to that.
Yeah, well, let me say first of all, somebody said that, can't remember the quote exactly, paraphrase it, that the ready resort to racism is the resort of scoundrels. And I think we've just had a glimpse of a couple of them there on the TV. I have been all over this country, and our presidential candidate at the last elections, now President Ramotar, has said what has always been the motto of the PPP and the PPPC. We must continuously strive to unify our people. Obviously, there are difficulties from time to time, but whether we're on the bottom house or on the hustings anywhere, this has been always our position. And this is why from various times we've talked about issues of having better balancing of the forces, the disciplinary forces, better integration between our people, a better sharing of the load in terms of developing our country. So Nagamuti is trying to preempt what he thinks people will see of him. But I think he has shot his load in this matter. It is clear that he has shot his load in this matter because he, for all his utterances over the last period, particularly now in this case, has been the one which is allowing for, perhaps he thinks, a racial collision. He is allowing for that. And is allowing, because the ordinary people will not do it by themselves, he's allowing for criminals, criminal youths, and certain political adventurers, arsonists and anarchists, to make use of certain opportunity to bring the country down and to bring us to a state where our economy and country would not be sustainable. He is a scoundrel in this matter.
I didn't see that press conference or any clips from it, but having been around politics for a long time, one would have expected he would have offered that particular explanation when in fact he is doing the very same thing. He and Nigel, as I said, are two newfound strong men of the AFC. You're not hearing the reasonable statement that used to come out of Raphael Trotman. You're not hearing anything from Kemrad Ramjatan here. But here is a new agenda for the AFC driven by Nigel Hughes and Moses Nagamutu. But they're now trapped in their own ego because they're now trying to use tactics that have failed to unite our people and have caused a lot of harm. I have never seen any conflict where there are any winners. In the 60s in Guyana, we were all losers. Every single segment of this population lost, and the nation lost even bigger. In Syria, there are no winners between the rebels and Assad. They're all losers, the people of Syria. And this country has to be governed by the rules, the law, and the order that we set down by the people's representative. And those who uphold that, those eminent lawyers who you just saw, they now are throwing that by the wayside. Because as Minister Ben says, for them they see themselves emerging in any chaos as the strong people of the country. That will only lead to Mogadishu. That's where it leads to. The sane, sensible people who want to lay roots in Guyana, they want us to all be reasonable, to be rational, and to let us use due process and prosecute, convict, and punish where guilt is, or guilt is found to be. Nigel represents, as I said earlier, the criminals and gives them due process. In this case, he and Moses, they are assigning themselves all three of the elements of due process. they are going to be prosecutor, jury, judge, and sentencer.
Talking about due process, the question is though, it's difficult for you to understand how violence will help, to ensure justice.
Fear. Fear is the only outcome of violence. It doesn't serve justice. It doesn't serve justice. Due process, healing, forgiveness, those are the things that serve justice. That is why so many countries have moved to abolish death penalties. You see over and over again as we tweet, as we surf, so many families of victims forgiving people. It's not violence that's going to serve justice. Violence is going to be used by certain people for their own means. That's why I say all and any means. And they have one particular goal. One particular goal. Because of the bitterness of some of the falling outs in the political parties, they can't put aside their bitterness and their personality differences and stay with professionalism. They can't do it.
I think the thing is though, what exactly is the motive? I think the president would have spoken today a little in terms of the direction in which he would have analyzed things in terms of how, the motive behind what is taking place.
Well, I think I did suggest before that the motive is coming to power. They have not been able, in spite of the reduction by 1 seat of the PPPC's position in Parliament, the people have still voted and returned the PPPC back to power. It's good work in terms of the economy, in terms of developing our social structures, our education, infrastructure, and all those things are still clear to see. And fear has always been the key. At election time, like the last one, sowing confusion, fear has been the key. We have always resorted to the ballot box, even when the ballot box was tampered with and could not be relied upon, and there was no confidence on the results of the ballot box. We on our side have always resorted faithfully to the ballot boxes to bring back a democratic, sustainable culture to our country. The only resort that they appear to have at all times, in and out of power, is the result of violence and racism. They want to get to power. They have perhaps been unable to pay attention to the things which will bring critical mass acceptance by the Guyanese people to come into power. We have worked assiduously to bring all Guyanese on our side to understand our message. And so for those who are outside, perhaps, of our arrangements, the only resort they see is the resort of violence. We don't mind peaceful protests. We're happy if people can protest. And we like that if there's a failing on our side and the government side on any of its agencies, people have the right to protest. That's guaranteed in the Constitution. Nobody wants a violent protest. Nobody wants what happened yesterday to occur. And so the only resort under these circumstances, and the example is evident in other countries where you have similar situations as we have, is that you have those who are anarchists, arsonists. They have given us in Georgetown here perhaps a taste, a glimpse of what occurred in Linden for perhaps a month and a half, and for what the people in Linden have suffered from and could not speak about. They have given us a taste of it. And nobody wants that. Linden, the mass of the people in Linden didn't want what occurred in Linden to happen. And the people in Georgetown and on the coast and the banks don't want what occurred yesterday to come. And so we want to continue to work strengthen the Guyana police force and the disciplined organizations, to bring about proper professionalism in the way they work, to work with the citizens to identify their failings, to work with the private enterprise and all people who rely on the police force to provide the service and protection so that the daily life could improve and the country could improve. We want that. We would be the first to criticize the police force or any organization if there is unprofessional conduct. And we would not want those individuals to remain in and continue to contaminate and bring down the standards of the organization. And the Guyana Police Force has a proud record over many years, over 100 years. So, as I'm saying, the intent of all of this is to come to power. And no attempt by trying to, we know that Luncheon, I think, made a statement at 11 o'clock in the afternoon, even before the statement was out. The statement wasn't out till about in the afternoon, about 6 in the afternoon on the news. But the protest was already on the way at the courts in the morning.
That was since 9 in the
Since
morning.
9 in the morning at the courts.
That was even before the statement was
Even
made.
before the statement was made and wasn't conjectured by Luncheon in any way. And they didn't have the opportunity to take it out of context. And then we knew that there were attempts to mobilize, as I said, in the West Coast and the West Bank in terms of bringing certain youth. And as I said, we understood that there was money given and inflammable material bought and shared out, liquids. So the intention is to bring disorder. And we want, I would particularly want to call on all concerned to continue to cooperate with the police force. Every organization has its feelings, whether it's a discipline service or an administrative service. Even in my own works ministries, there are problems from time to time which you have to work with, improve the standards, optimize the way we do things, provide a better service and goods to our people. We have to work at those issues, and we all desire better service and professionalism from all our organizations. And those who would bring down and shame and hurt the organization, the country, have the option to leave or to be put out. And there are standards and rules and appraisal systems by which this is achieved. And then there are the courts to which they have resort to if there are issues.
Eddie, Robson did mention this issue of race. And last evening, he did also mention that Indo Guyanese suffered the brunt of the beatings and the robberies and so forth. And there was one particular blog that I saw, and in that blog, they were calling for other communities like Agricola to rise up. But imagine if Afro-Guyanese communities throughout this country rise up and do what those few on the Agricola public road did. What would happen? Imagine Afro-Guyanese against Indo-Guyanese again. And one particular blog was calling for that. You know, there's this doomsday clock in the world. As the crisis in the world gets hotter, they would move the clock towards midnight hour. And apparently these newfound strongmen of the AFC want to play brinkmanship with this country, keeping us right to the edge, and they control this. And they're supported by their elements in the press. Because last night, you're flicking the televisions, you're calling your colleagues, you're listening to the telephone calls, you're reading the blogs, you're on Facebook. And I'm looking all over, and one particular media house, Demerara Waves. You know, the only thing that they had out was 3 babies injured by smoke. They didn't even say it was smoke from the tires or tear smoke. But inflaming, trying to send that message to inflame the situation. Look at today's kite show. Didn't speak anything about all the deviantness. They spoke how the police were so challenged, people drawing lines and daring the police to cross the line. and how the masses drove the police back. And I really want to take my hat off to President Ramotar in that statement he issued tonight, because I think in the short message he gave to the nation, he covered all of the elements I saw in that protest, including the resolve of the police people who were on the front line there yesterday and those who had to support them. Those who had to support them. And we also have to join tonight publicly and commend them. It's not the first time the opposition elements have tested the police resolve. And this police force has acted in a manner to protect democracy in our country. And tomorrow should be Flowers Day for police people anywhere. And I know that they will continue to act in a professional manner, obeying the laws of this country. We're going to have some deviance here and there. As Wobson said, Minister said, nothing is perfect. But President Ramotar touched on all of the elements. And while he's the president and he has to make certain very diplomatic statements, some of us may have the luxury of calling a spade a spade. And yesterday's incitement by the opposition AFC, for me, was nothing less than that.
I mean, we would have examined what happened yesterday and so forth, but the reality of the situation is the impact that, you know, and some may want to say, you know, it happened yesterday, it ended, and that's it. But we have to look at, for example, Caribbean Airlines had to cancel flights. Persons were on the road for those long hours.
The embassies issued warnings.
And even maybe some investors are getting a different view, you know, based on what happened.
Yes, it's a setback to the economy, setback in terms of investor confidence. I know the leader of the PNC, APNO, Mr. David Granger, did speak of losing, that he did say that he lost confidence in the Guyana police force. I would want to encourage and to say that there are elements in the force who have to be scrubbed out to tidy up and improve, but that we all need a police force and that all factions, all stakeholders have to work together to have improvements in all the organizations in our country, including the Guyana police force. But if there's a pronouncement by a leading member of our political entities that there's a complete loss of confidence in a disciplined force, then what does that suggest? I think it's a fairly reckless statement that may be perhaps ill-considered at the moment. Most of the police persons that I have encountered, that I have engaged with, have a great interest in performing professional work. There are issues with systems and supervision and so on which have to be worked out and improved. And I know Minister Rohee has been working hard in terms of improving those systems, in terms of having the police sector reform activity carried out, in terms of tracking issues related to the Disciplined Services Forces report, which is on a commission, at the Parliamentary Commission. We all have an interest in having an improvement. But if broad sweeping statements about having no confidence in the police force and these types of things, it's unhelpful.
But it's also part of that collaboration between the AFC and the PNC-led AMNU. It's part of the collaboration, as I said, to shake and shatter the confidence of our police people. So you hear them banging over and over. Mr. Hoy tried this when he talked about kit and kin. You know, so you see so many mirror images in these incidents. And Minister, sorry to have it butt in, but back to this issue of the damage done. Outside of the hurt and the pain and all the dislocation last night to the tens of thousands of people, the whole country now suffers. The image of Caribbean Airline, the embassies, and the diaspora. I know one, my wife's cousin was supposed to have been on a flight coming in last night, after 35 years the first time. Immediately I can see saying Guyana has no change. What I left 35 years ago, I'm coming back. I was coming back to. She mightn't even arrive. So that diaspora now is now spreading this image. And that will take years to rebuild. But investor confidence. When you look at a map of Guyana, you see Georgetown here, because Agricola will show up as Georgetown. And Linden so close, less than half an inch, or depending on the scale, a quarter inch. It looks like the same place. After the building expo in July, a week before Linden, we had the largest manufacturer of paints, paint products, who came in here. And they were looking at setting up a plant in Guyana to service Brazil, because they feel their product is competitive, to do Suriname. And then Linden happened. And immediately I got from the managing director and the chairman of the board. He said, people I've known for decades, Mansour, what is happening in your country? That's what the email said. And they were supposed to come to Gaia Expo. Yesterday didn't happen yet. They said, well, we're going to think about next year. And that's a small business compared to the large transnational. But it's the largest paint manufacturer in Jamaica. These things do have an effect on all of us and the economy. If the economy can't grow to the level we predict, the opposition will say we failed as a government. If we can't deliver to the people the better standard of living as we promised on November the 28th, the people will say we failed. All this is incited by the events like yesterday. And when you look at Linden, and when you look at Public Road Agricola, when you look at what has been said by the opposition and the close collaboration between the two of them inside and outside of Parliament, there is a master design. And what I'm saying here may also send ripples through investors and so forth. But this is what we have to plan for. As every good Christian will say, you plan for the worst and expect the best. And that's what we're going to have to look at. It means that all of us will have to dig deep into our resolve. And I keep saying over and over again, the good people of this country, I said it, the good people of Linden, the good people who reside in Agricola, we can't be silent. Because when we don't get involved, when the good people don't get involved, we lead the bad people to rule.
But even to today, checks around at workplaces, schools, those are all areas that were affected. A lot of schools, some of them were closed, some of them poor turnout. Matter of fact, we have had quite a number of calls, persons asking, is anything happening there? I'm sending home my staff now, and that kind of thing. So though it's, even though the events, what happened there ended, it's still continuing in the minds of people who have to pass through that area.
Yes, yesterday's eruption, as it was at Agricola, the public road, created a lot of fear, of course, naturally, and a lot of anxiety in the minds of ordinary people. There was a reduction in movement of on the road, a marked reduction in traffic over the Harbour Bridge and the East Bank and other places. Trucks coming with food from the Essequibo coast are going there too. And a marked reduction in persons working in the offices. So we would have lost yesterday and today, and maybe issues to the weekend. But I want to focus principally on the issues relating to the police and the economy. Mansour is pointing out the economy issues. If there's no police, if there's not an assertive police, and the police force has to be assertive when there are law and order and other issues, nothing will happen, nothing will grow. It is a critical organization, a fundamental organization in terms of our development, in terms of providing service and protection. and we have to stand with the police and to make improvements. Further, if any Guyanese community, where there's the people up to the south of our country, of Masakanyari, Gunstrip, if they're hurt or affected, we are all hurt or affected. If people are affected in Agricola or in Berbice or Quarantine or Bartik or any place, we are all hurt and affected. We are joined at the hip as a people. We can't survive without each other. We can't build Guyana unless we all put our shoulders to the wheel and collectively build the country and have an understanding of how we share that load and how we relate to each other. You can't buy food in the market without having an understanding of where it comes from, who planted it. We can't have building of things, digging of gold or diamonds or the cutting of wood without having an understanding where it is coming from. What are the good Guyanese hands that have produced these things? And so we cannot survive as a people without each other. So any effort which would attack fundamental law and order in our country, which would demean and vilify the police, which is steeped in political adventurism and opportunism, should be condemned. Should be condemned, and our people have to pay attention to what is going on, to have a better understanding of it, show forbearance, give the fundamental support for law and order, and pay attention to those issues which will sustain our economy, our country, improve discipline in our society, set aside lawlessness, and let us have a good, sustainable life for all Guyanese. That is what it is about.
Eddie, you mentioned what happened today, and today's absence from school, today's absence from work, today's early closures of business, the tensions that our people, especially in Georgetown and the East Bank and the West Dem, the tensions that they felt, also was fueled by what was said yesterday by the AFC. The AFC felt yesterday they achieved their end. And so they were calling for a bigger protest today and coming into the center of the city. So that was what drove most of the people who I spoke to, or spoke with, I should say, today, because they called to find what was happening in town. Should I send my children to school? Do you know this? Because they said the opposition was calling for even bigger protests today. And let's be very frank. When they call for protests, people feel protest equals the robbery, violence against them. And Indo Guyanese feel that even more. So that was, to me, the effect today. Not because of what only happened on the streets of Agricola last night, the public road, but also the call by the AFC. And we can't divorce this. We can't disassociate the opposition political elements' involvement in what has been happening in Linden and in Agricola.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for spending the past hour. I think we would have touched on quite some very important points, and we would have brought some sort of light or some sort of context to what transpired yesterday and what may have been the ulterior motive. I want to thank you very much for joining us at home. Of course, we will continue to keep you updated as to what's happening, any new developments. We will be updating you. I want to thank you.
Thank you.